Winemaking's difficult because there are no right answers. It's an infinite number of possibilities and flavors, and it's a craft that will never be mastered. It's a journey. It's not just a product.
Welcome everybody to today's edition of the Wine Stream with Palmaz Vineyards. I'm Florencia Palmaz, and joining me as always is my brother Christian Palmaz and sister-in-law Jessica. Hi guys.
Lots of glasses again. You
oh,
always know it's a good episode.
Lots of glasses, lots of red. It's going to be a purple teeth show at the end of this.
That's right. Yeah.
We've got something super fun and daring, and you know, I'm putting myself out there. We're probably going to make a total fool of myself by the end of this show, but we are doing something that I've always loved in the wine industry, which is tasting blind. So we are live and blind, and I don't know what I'm drinking. I have a general idea, and with us joining shortly will be Master Sommelier Aaron Patrick from Republic National Distributing in Texas, an incredible palate, and will hopefully taste through and guess one of the funnest games in the wine business, what we've got in front of us. So before we dive into all the babies, we actually have been doing a lot of this week. Yesterday, I actually was with the winemaking team, and we tasted through all of our barrel samples of the 2019 vintage. It was 39 wines. It's 3 flights of 13. I finally got the purple from yesterday off. I can feel my tongue again. So not to say that I'm a little handicapped, but yeah, that was yesterday's, that was what I was sitting next to yesterday. And it's
so tell us, like, what was it like? I mean, you know, this is really the first time you've tasted this vintage in quite a while. So give us the update.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally the June parcel tasting is for us to check in on the wines right before they go into the summer racking. So we pull the sample of every single barrel parcel that we have, basically looking for kind of 3 things. One, technical, you know, how are the wines doing and progressing? Is there anything that we need to address on an individual barrel lot, as we're going to be racking here in the next month? 2, how are the parcels in the vineyard tasting for that vintage? You know, how are our farming practices? And of course, we love to look at all the vigor data and kind of see how things are going. And even check in on a little bit of some of our variables, like maybe some fermentation practices, some little tweaks and tests. We've always got cool little side experiments going, whether they be slight variations in temperature or variations in oak, or variations in how we may have sorted or picked the fruit. So we do all those tastings and tests at this tasting. It's super, super nerdy, and it's an incredible opportunity for us to check in and see how the wines are. I can tell you,
it's done blind, right?
Blind. Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll taste through blind, so the 13, we pre-pour all 13 glasses, and we'll start tasting. It's kind of blind, I'm going to be honest. When we start the process, we do know what parcels they are. The real key part to that's blind is not knowing what quantity of wine is in each parcel, because you don't want to be biased. There's always a commercial side to this, that you don't want to bias the quality of the final blend or the wines and decisions based off of sort of just pure financial. You know, when we're in this point of sort of the artistry of the winemaking, the blending, the critiquing of our performance, we want to be looking at quality, not quantity. So. Yeah. 2019, then of course, as we're tasting through, we'll start revealing to ourselves data like location and parcels, just to kind of check in and sort of see how progress is doing. And so far, really nice. So double thumbs up. All the parcels are progressing really nicely. We don't have any real dramas or issues to address in the cellar. I mean, the winemaking team here is just so extraordinary. We have an amazing team of just craftsmen and professionals. So very rarely do we actually have a technical problem in the cellar in that regard. And then in the vineyard, it's really just incredible to see some of the things that you actually implemented, Chris, a decade ago are really tasting, coming round. There was a couple parcels that I could literally wow, things that we did 10 years ago as far as soil preparations or, row direction changes. It seems like this is the year that they just started really coming around. So it's exciting.
Thank you. It is nice to get that report card. Not everything works out that way. It is funny how sometimes, like Florence is talking about, we'll implement a change in the farming or, even something simple like a change in the cover crop. You don't see the effect that year or even the year after. It takes time to really see it. So, I'll check in occasionally and so, how's block P doing? And, oh, no, same. Okay. Well, and then all of a sudden, we'll get the thumbs up. So I'm glad to hear that. Now I got
block
the debrief.
P, thumbs up. Still agree with the replanting that you did in block P. I think that's going to make it even better. So there's, of course, nothing's ever perfect. We always we give him a good thumbs up and then we give him here's the huge list of things that have to be fixed. So it's instead of the honey-do list, it's the vineyard-do list. So
that's all right. We're used to both.
So it's going to be a great vintage. Generally speaking, after tasting all these parcels, it's sort of my first peek of what I think the vintage style is going to be. And generally speaking, I think 2019 is going to be a wine of extraordinary tannin evolution. It's tasting like a very finished wine already. I can tell you in previous years, like 2015 and 2013, I couldn't feel my tongue for 2 days after doing it because the tannins were still so edgy and so rough in June. This time around, we were commenting with Mia. It was like, wow, I can actually feel my face on round 3. So the tannins are just really supple and they're very evolved. A little of that is the refinement of the winemaking team, of course, but a lot of that also has to do with the credit to the vintage. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to blend up. And of course, won't even release until 2022, 2023. So it's got a long way still to go. So it's like giving the infant 6-month checkup. Does it track your finger? Does it hold an object? That's kind of where we're at with the wines right now.
Awesome.
So, okay, I'm ready to go. Let's bring on Aaron.
I'm really excited about this. Tell us a little bit about Aaron's background.
Yeah, so for everyone who's joining us today, Aaron is an incredible master sommelier, has actually trained with a very renowned group of tasters here in the San Francisco area. He worked in the San Francisco fine dining industry for a long time and then moved on to Texas and is the director of business development for RNDC, which is Republic National Distributing Company. And one of the super cool things about wine distributors, heads of education, especially in the fine wine portfolios, is these guys have their entire inventory to play with and taste through, and of course have direct contact to all the vintners around the world. So they get this inside scoop perspective almost better than anyone else, because restaurateurs are, of course, limited to just what they have in their inventory. And then, we're having some technical difficulties. We'll get them back.
Well, you know how it is, right? It's a live show.
Yeah, always. Always. It's live and blind, and sometimes it's lost. So it's a lot of fun. So Aaron agreed to come on and do one of the most gutsy things for a sommelier, which is to taste blind live on camera and do what they call the deductive tasting practice. It's a art, and it's something that they train for heavily in the Court of Master Sommeliers. And he's going to show us a little bit of the deductive reasoning, the process, and how they proceed live as they're tasting wines. Is Aaron on? Is
Aaron, you with us?
I'm here.
Can you see me? Unfortunately, we don't see you at all.
Oh,
there you are. Welcome.
As easy as that.
The
Wait, I
reveal.
agreed to all those things you said?
Yes, I think so. You did.
Okay, good. Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, so we shipped out to you about a week ago some bottles that just have little stickies, right?
I love them.
Yes.
These are fun.
Aren't they fun? They're really pretty good. I was just tasting through them. I think they're all in good shape. I'm not concerned with any oxidation. And I've got an identical set, and my brother and Jessica have the third set. So we're going to follow along. I actually don't know what we're tasting. I have a general idea, and we're going to share with everybody what it is that we're tasting. We've got the number 1 and number 2, right? We basically have two games to play. So behind door number 1 is 1 and 2, right? These are 2 different parcels on the property. One of the cool things, here you are. One of the cool things of our property is it's almost 2,000 feet elevation change from the bottom to the top. So completely different terroir, very different microclimates at the top and the bottom. So the simple question is, it is both Cabernet. What's what? Where is it coming from? We're going to give you one good, easy thing to eliminate. The middle vineyard, the little J-shaped vineyard there, the yellow and green and pink, none of that's Cabernet. Wow. So you've got basically top or bottom.
I like it.
But before we dive in, walk us through the deductive tasting, reasoning, the training. How did you prepare to become such an extraordinary palate?
Well, there's definitely people who are gifted at this and that can put their nose in the glass and tell you exactly what it is and the vintage because they've smelled that smell before. Wine's a little bit more complex than just like a green apple to me. So I really needed to work at it. And I use this analogy all the time, and it's not my analogy, but I think it's the best one for me to describe what I had to go through. So the shortstop for the Yankees, he knows that throw from shortstop to first base because he's done that throw 1,000,000 times a year. He's practiced it over and over again. There are gifted people that you can say that person's going to play baseball because they are just amazing, but that shortstop is practiced over and over again. And that's what we do with blind tasting is we taste wines constantly, and we make sure that we understand acidity and tannins and fruit and just all the components that go to making a correct deductive reason for why the wine is what it is, why the vintage is that specific vintage. So much so that I think for the year I passed the tasting exam for the Court of Master Sommeliers, I wrote off $10,000 in wine. Don't tell anyone. But
Whoa!
It's like having a book. I needed to have that book in order to pass the class, right?
Wow, that's dedication to a craft. But of course, pretty delicious, right? You get to actually drink what you're training.
It was well worth it in the long run, but like a muscle, like training, you need to practice all the time. So I try to practice periodically, not to that level, or else my wife would be very upset. But you can't spend $10,000 every year on wine.
Yeah, well, luckily you also have a pretty amazing warehouse or multiple warehouses there in Texas with our NDC. You guys pretty much have got the best book in the business in Texas. I'm going to probably upset the other guys, but don't worry about it.
That's okay.
So, Aaron, can you walk us through, do you have like a tick or a process that you do every time you approach a glass? I mean, I've seen some people like be really systematic about how they approach every glass that they begin the deductive tasting with.
Yeah, the deductive tasting, you work at it the same way, and it's however you feel comfortable, but typically for every student who's going through it, they do sight, then smell, and then taste, and then initial conclusion and final conclusion. So I would go through the wine and say that this is a dark purple wine. It's opaque. It's purple at the core to a purple rim. There's definite staining of the tears. Leads me to think it's a thick-skinned grape varietal. And yeah, let's see, viscosity, which it helps you work out alcohol, pretty much seems to be high viscosity. And then you go to the.
How do you? Yeah. So people always talk about how they. I always loved how the legs. Tell us what you see in legs.
Legs, yeah.
What are you looking for?
Exactly. Everyone says legs or tears, and so you're just looking how the liquid forms on the round part or the bulb of the glass, and how quickly it forms and falls, or how slowly they start to form and fall. It's an indicator of the level of alcohol. And once you taste those $10,000 worth of wines, or those thousands and millions of wines in the year, it helps you perceive the level of alcohol, because you're training this 13.5% alcohol wine versus this 14.5% alcohol wine. You're putting them next to each other, and you're just looking to see how they react differently. So the slower they form and slower they fall, typically the higher the alcohol, and the faster they form and the faster they fall, the lower the alcohol level.
Interesting. Is there any truth to also the distance between the tiers being an indicator of alcohol?
Scientifically, I haven't seen anything. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a chemist, but you can, maybe someone has told you differently. I haven't seen anything that says that.
Oh, I've seen every version of it. I've read research papers on, the chemical effect of this, and then I've also read converse papers that say it's all bogus. It's all about the glass.
Yeah.
I agree. There's a lot of folklore around the legs and the tears, but okay.
There's also some interaction with sugar, but go ahead.
So that's the swirl and the appearance. What next?
On the nose, you're looking for any flaws in the wine, and there's no flaws in this wine. You say the wine is clean, it's clear, it's fruit forward, it seems to be round and rich in fruit components, and then you typically go into the descriptors of fruit components, and I usually go with red wine, red to black. So this has red cherry, red cassis to black currant, into other aromas that are in the wine, like purple violets. This has a nice.
That you said violets. I've got my violets growing in the vineyard. Like violets are in the garden right now, and it's just amazing. But it's just so violets and lilacs right now.
Yeah. Violets. There's like a baker's chocolate, like a bitter chocolate to it. Not overly pronounced, but I feel it's there. There's a slight greenness, but not in an off-putting way, almost like a spearmint into green green bell pepper. Yeah, and there's a rich vanilla. And for wood markers, when you smell a wine, you get anything in relation to vanilla, cinnamon, clove, cardamom, like a toastiness. I usually get oak markers that indicates that the wine sees some sort of new oak, and typically French oak. So I would say this sees a large percentage of new French oak. And then you get to the palate.
So I can tell you that both of these parcels, 1 and 2, were aged in their first year in new barrels, in the same new barrel, and not only the same new barrel but from the same tree. So the barrels were toasted the same way, and we use all French oak, so that's a giveaway. So it's very interesting how different these two wines to you. I 100% agree with you, Aaron. Aaron, tell us a little bit about when you taste. So, obviously, these wines these are unfinished, and they're in the middle of their barrel aging period. Do you change your protocol when you taste sort of unfinished components versus like what we're going to do next year, where we taste finished wines?
Well, first question: what was the tree's name? And
once they chop it down, they don't tell us. It's like telling us the name of the cow that we eat.
I gotcha. So we won't talk about the tree's name, but I don't change my process whatsoever. What I'm envisioning is typically a softening of components, a softening of fruit, a softening of tannin, and an overall integration of all the different components in the wine. So I don't change it at all, and I am not a winemaker by any stretch of it. I don't pretend to be on TV either, but you can tell me when you're tasting the different components in the barrel versus, in the tank, what are you guys looking for?
Yeah. Well, so when we're tasting barrel lots like we did yesterday, we're looking for sort of like what you're doing by breaking it down. We could care less whether it smells like blackberries or cherries because we're not responsible for that, right? So it's really first any presence of flaws, and when we mean flaws, it's kind of that trained dog trick of how far can we perceive cork taint, Brettanomyces, copper sulfides, things like that, things that would smell off, signs of bacterial contamination or distress reduction. So that's kind of one. Then once you get past the flaws, then you get into what is it about? What is this wine about? And I look at it like, is this first and foremost a fruit-driven wine? Right? Does it pop up out of the glass and tell you, hello, I am a lovely bouquet of cherries, or I'm a ripe bowl of strawberries, right? And then, of course, like you do, same thing. We go into the spice components, and then we kind of say, okay, what is its character? But then once it's in the mouth, whichever, we're getting a little ahead, I look actually for, is it transitions? Is there harmony? Is there a beginning and a middle and end that seamlessly go? Almost very rarely does a single parcel of wine give you everything you want, right? That's the whole point of blending, is to bring it together. So what's its core? What's this parcel good at? Is it a good frontline wine? Is it an attack? Is it a nice belly, soft round middle? Or is it the tail of our monster that we're going to eventually build? So we kind of, build it like a Lego. Right? And so it's insert here cherries with a nice mid palate, with oak components with a nice finish, and then bring in a little bit of a touch of something a little odd and funky to give it depth and complexity and intrigue with a nice, attack. Now, the irony is with all that I'm saying, the second I combine something that smells like chocolate and something that smells like cherries, I don't get chocolate-covered cherries. It's so infuriating.
That is so true, Flo. You make it sound so simple, but it's not. No,
it's not.
1 plus 2 does not equal 3 when you're working with wines.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah,
So there's a whole lot of trial and error. It's really like building a house of cards, right? So can I put these two and get something here? And does that actually make a roof? No, it doesn't make a roof. Okay, start over. But, okay, does this make a roof? Yes, that makes a roof. Great, next floor. So we just do that combination after combination after combination, and we just sort of let our intuition go through it. As you can imagine, this is really the art of Tina and Mia. They're incredible craftsmen. They have over, multiple decades now, honed that intuition of A and B giving you a nice combination of C. So I'm eternally in awe of them. I kind of feel like the goofy vintner. I'm the Mikey likes it. They just sort of roll their eyes. They deal with me at the table, and then I kind of like, yep, I like where it's going. But don't ask me technically how to get to the final product. But they're the pros. So
that's funny you say that, because blind tasting is similar to where you're like, okay, well, I get high acid and I get peach. Okay, then it's got to be Riesling. No, high acid and peach could be something else. So it's about going from that big funnel and trying to funnel down to what it can be through tasting, through sight, smell, and taste as a whole.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so. So have you tasted through 1 and 2? I don't want to bias. The other thing that we do, and I'm sure you guys do it in the sommelier world as well. When tasting, we're silent so that you can't tip me off and I can't tip you off, right? And just like you see good, responsible, professional, I've got my spittoon here today too, because I actually knew I was going to get really silly if I did all this.
There's a lot of wine here, which thank you for that. Yeah, so thank you for the hints for as far as where they come from, as far as floor appellation relatively up to higher elevation. So what I look for in floor appellation is vines that didn't necessarily have to struggle, and you can kind of see that in the grapes. And there's a roundness, a plushness, a fruitiness to any grapes that are grown on the floor appellation. And then when you get up to higher elevation, mountain fruit, the vineyard, the soil is typically shallow soil and topsoil, and then rocky underneath. So these vines really had to dig. There's water stress that happens to them. They're not getting all the nutrients from the soil, because all that soil was pushed off the mountain and is down at the floor appellation. And so I'm looking for something that's a little bit more tannic and aggressive, but not in a bad way, in an ageability way, and something that's a little bit more astringent, which is fun. And the fruit for me, usually at elevation, because of the water stress and also because of the cooler temperatures. So as you go up in elevation, of course, you're going to get cooler. You're also going to get some more wind. I'm looking just for that darker berry fruit as well.
Absolutely. I always look at it like you can feel the strain of the climb, in your mouth. It's just a little more astringent, a little more puckering. So you want to make a guess? Which is which?
I'd love to. So I would personally say wine number one is more your vineyard appellated wine at your winery. It seems to me a little bit more flesh or bloating on the palate. And wine number two seems to have more tannic structure to it, more astringency to it. Ooh. But do you know what the wines are? I don't.
Hold on. So I'm going to take, just for grins, I'm going to take the opposite view, because my first impression was that actually the tannins were a little more tightly wound, a little edgier on one, and that two, to me also, two has a riper fruit. And the only reason why I say this is it feels a little bit more plum driven and less cassis and raspberry driven, which to me is very typical of our 300-foot elevation vineyard. The other thing that I'm going to just throw a guess at, I'm putting myself way out there, Chris, mark my words, I think wine one is either clone 4 or clone 6.
All right,
I'm putting myself way out there.
Now you're way out there. So
I'm way out there.
If it's clone 4 or 6, I'm walking. I'm out of here.
Well, I've got a little bit of bias on you that I know what's planted at different elevations. So, I'm cheating a little.
All right. So by now, I'm sure everybody knows. I'm the only one who knows what these wines are. And because my palate has the least value in the winemaking program, it's why I'm the moderator today. So Jess, what do you think?
I actually agree with Aaron. I think glass number one is, lower elevation, and glass number two is the mountain.
Okay. So everyone's locked in their bets? Are we ready to look?
It's like we need the game show.
Yes, I hope we're right.
All right. Give us the reveal.
Here it is. So, Upper Vineyard is sample one.
Oh, nice.
And,
man. Well done.
Well, okay, but look, I actually agree with everything you said, Aaron. Everything you said, and you and Jess you're on in that what you're looking for are characteristics of Upper Vineyard. But as we all know, terroir is terroir, and it can show up anywhere. And the microclimate differences between these locations is rather extreme. I mean, like Florencia mentioned, 1,100 feet of elevation change between these two parcels. So let's dive a little bit deeper. So I'm going to show a tool that we use in the winemaking program.
Wait, I've got one more prediction. Wine 2, is that Ladera G2, G1?
Oof. Now she's
Oh
getting cocky.
man.
Now I'm getting cocky. I just tasted all 39 wines yesterday. I'm prepped. I'm ready.
Well, Well, we'll see. We'll see. So let's.
Oh, no.
You are actually correct. So. So what you're seeing on screen here.
Very nice.
So what you're seeing on screen here is basically a breakdown of what's in the lower vineyard. So this is glass 2. So these two parcels, and just to break down, this is kind of what the winemaking team looks like. So we're reviewing the Felix data, how the fermentation went, and we're looking at the vigor data in the bottom right. So this is basically a metric tool that shows how did the vineyard overall perform. Did our farming inputs result in a lower standard deviation? In other words, by the end of the year, when the ripeness occurred and the winemakers walked down the rows, were they going to expect, great control and ripeness, or were they going to expect areas where you have over-ripeness and under-ripeness because of differentiation in the parcel? Overall, the standard deviation was relatively flat, and we're looking for that bottom blue line on the bottom right of the bottom right vigor data. So that bottom blue line is relatively flat, which means standard deviation relatively stayed the same. In the Felix data, fermentation was relatively uneventful. No alarms occurred. Fermentation seemed on track. As you see, we have a nice steady drop of the blue line through the meat of the fermentation. Pump overs occurred on time. I don't see any issues. We didn't have any temperature spikes. There was really no drama. So it was a successfully fermented wine.
It is, though, Ladera 3, so I was off by a couple hundred yards.
Well, I mean, that's pretty impressive, Flo, because the reality is, you probably do. I mean, you and the winemaking team do know Ladera versus, say, Los Olivos
Absolutely.
And Ladera definitely has a unique characteristic, but there's several different clones and rootstocks. So the clone, let's see if I can zoom in up here on this clone area.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So is clone 338. But interestingly, there's 2 rootstocks across this parcel. These were fermented together, so you have Riparia and 420A on both of these locations. And it is, pretty steep vineyard.
It's pretty steep. It's so steep there are a couple rows that are impossible to walk down. No, this is really steep. This is what I call the slippery slope vineyard. Yeah, you go barreling down. Like the first 10 rows, it's you slide it. It's a lot of fun.
And it is very steep, and so it's funny. I think it can fool you into thinking it's mountain fruit. As a result, it's not really valley floor, but really no part of our property represents, I think, valley floor fruit, maybe block D. So
that makes me feel a whole lot better.
Oh yeah, no. So, and that's the great, right? That's the great thing about blind tastings is you're never wrong because it's so true. What I ended up honing in on was that generous, supple, plum and riper fruit characteristic of the 2. And that's what I remember of Ladera, and notoriously large tannins. So they're notoriously large wines with very ripe fruit characteristics on the rest of our property. So I just from my memory, right? Oh, a little bit of plum and really big tannins. That still could be 300. So sorry. Interesting. I do.
No, it's all good. So now the upper vineyard parcel was the other glass, obviously glass 1. And these 2 little baby parcels are often fermented together, not always, but so it's block P, and block P is.
Tell me what the clone is.
I hate to say this, it's clone 4. It's really not fair.
Clone 4. I have like a love affair with clone 4.
Aaron's left.
I literally, I did my homework yesterday. I drank all the wines yesterday. Just happened to get lucky on this.
Oh man, she cheated. I love it.
She cheated. She cheated. I mean, yeah. She totally cheated. This parcel is unique. They're both clone 4, both 3309. And this is a challenging piece of vineyard to farm. There's a lot of soil type differentiation between this area. This is where vigor really plays a role. You see that more steeper decline in the standard deviation. That's because we kind of start out with trouble and we fix it over the course of the year with our targeted irrigation system. And this is where vigor pays for itself.
Super rocky, super windy, everything you were saying about high altitude vineyards, this thing has got it. It's rocks, it's sun, it's wind, it's dry. It is all that concentration. And to be fair, one of the real tricks of our gravity flow winemaking method is that we can take what normally would be just wound so tight you can't feel your face tannins and still make them, you know, really pretty supple. So, and that's really that's the winemaking. But the environment is absolutely everything you described in a high altitude vineyard. This guy's got it. LP are all rocks.
and you know, so, and the other interesting thing about this parcel, I don't know if you noticed this on the vigor on the Felix data, but your Brix level was significantly less than what you saw coming into the fermentation from the lower vineyard. So, and I don't know if maybe Tina does this a little bit on purpose. I mean, she definitely has. Looking at the weather data, she could have hung the fruit to any Brix level she wanted. Right, there was no rain that impeded that decision. So I wonder sometimes, like when they're deciding, let's pick this vineyard, upper vineyard fruit, they're not looking for a little more of a texture decision than maybe texture plus aromatics than just sheer sugar. You know,
well, the other thing, remember that wind, I mean, so the lower vineyards got definitely the coastal wind coming in at it. And there are a lot of times that, and Mia reminded me of this yesterday, there are a lot of times where we will have a northerly at the top of the vineyard and the coastal westerly coming in at the bottom. So, so we literally have wind coming in from opposite directions because this top vineyard has got this northern wind. It's coming off of the Sacramento Delta. It's dry, it's hot, and it's very dehydrating. So sometimes we don't have the luxury of letting this thing hang out like as if it were supple, lower elevation fruit that we could just wait for that perfect time. Sometimes it's like, ooh, it's beginning to get a little dry up there. And we'll just pick it because it's like, okay, it's either start ending up with those overcooked instead of fresh fruit flavors, you ended up going into those sort of preserved versions of those expressions, and we'd rather pick before we get there. So sometimes we don't get the Brix we want, but we definitely get the concentration.
It also is kind of no surprise to me. The upper vineyard fruit, right, has a little more texture quality to it. You can see, I don't know if you saw that, 27 days of overall tank time on skins. Tina went over 30 days with, so she wanted obviously a longer extended maceration. Maybe that was to help soften the tannin presence. I think she almost went to 32 days of tank time on the on this parcel. So you can see how the reason we use this data is because here we are a year later, we have totally forgotten what's happened, and to be able to put it all in one place for them to sort of relive the decision making. Here we are, 33 days now of extended maceration time on tank 1D.
Wow. Awesome. Oh my God. Thank you, Aaron. I promise I didn't cheat. I just tasted yesterday.
It's okay. It's totally fine. I mean, it's
all right, but you're actually.
It shows the fact that the winemakers usually know the wines better than anyone.
That's true. That is very true. Okay, now, game number 2. Door number 2.
Door number 2.
So these are the Palmaz final blends. This is a 4-year vertical, and I think should we say the years, because I think that gives us a lot of. I know that in a real exam situation, you wouldn't even be told what year it is, right? They would just hand you a glass.
Yeah, you would get the glass, and you would decipher what year it is based on the area that you called and the grape varietal that you called. However, it could be something that's 2 years that are very similar to each other, like Napa 12 and 13, which were abundant in the fruit and typically abundant in structure, both bumper years as far as crop. I would try to decipher if it was 12, which is more fleshy to me, or 13, which is more tannic. If you're in the relative range, I don't think it's going to be counted against you. I don't know, because I haven't examined the Master Sommelier exam, but it is what it is.
Okay, so we're going to narrow the parameters, and this is 13 through 16, right? 13, 14, yes. 15, 16. So they're out of order, obviously.
Okay.
I don't know what the order is. Chris knows the order. And the idea is, can we, I don't know what you want to do. If you want to be so gutsy as to actually identify, or do we just want to put them youngest to oldest?
It's up to you. I mean, we could try to identify. I feel like there's some things we should be looking at. Maybe we talk about the things that we should be looking for in the different vintages, and then go from there.
Yeah,
so you said
absolutely.
13, 14, 15, 16?
Yep, Chris, you want to, let's give ourselves a little handicap. Why don't you prep us with what is the technical weather data, and then we'll try to match wine to weather. How's that sound?
Well, you'd never ask.
So,
wow, it's like literally my brother's favorite thing to do.
This was literally my role during blending sessions with the wineries. Okay, so yeah, we'll quickly prepare. So 13, and Aaron, so this is weather measured as an average of each of the 3 vineyard elevations. We have 3 METAR stations on property. This is an average of the data collected at all 3. So what you have on screen here is the beginning of the growing season, the end of the growing season as defined by bud break to harvest of the last category of that varietal. The green bars show inches of rainfall per day. So you have 365 days on the calendar there. January 1st to December 31st, from 0 to 4 inches of rain. And then you have the high of the day and the low of the day. So you can see the delta spread between the two. So 13, other than being a vintage of incredibly low rainfall, really no pressures. Spring was spring. We had a normal summer. No real extreme in heat. I will tell you that we're a fully irrigated vineyard, and we have no limitation on water. So you shouldn't see any signs of like heat stress on vines, or we're not dry farming or anything like that. So you won't find those kinds of characteristics. In 14 vintage, very long growing season. That's kind of the one thing that stands out. It was a little bit strange that Cabernet bud braked so concurrently with the whites. And rains, lingered through April, but nothing significant. Slower rise in the temperatures, but reasonably long summer. And obviously, again, no constraint in the fall. So it wasn't a short harvest. So you should, be able to achieve ripeness. 15, a little bit cooler springtime. More traditional Chardonnay bud break to Cabernet, in terms of length, shorter growing season for 15. And some, bigger warmth. You have some higher highs present towards the end of beginning of aeration through ripeness, obviously with some hot days there nearing 100. In 16, again, pretty great vintage, long growing season for Cabernet. The only thing to really note here is obviously some very hot days during the peak of harvest. So all of these vintages, 13, 14, 15, and 16 were great years for Napa Valley in terms of providing long enough growing seasons, giving us the presence we need to be able to ripen fruit appropriately. So they were not compromise years like, say, you would have seen in, say, 2009, 2010.
Okay. Just tasting through, getting my bearings. I'm ready to almost make a conclusion.
Wow. Wait, hold on, I'm chatting. Weak. It's like picking the best children. They're all delicious.
You don't have to get rid of any, Flo. You can keep them all.
Oh, you're right.
The best children is right.
I do wish some of my children to go off to other homes, but you're right. I did keep a few.
I get people who ask me, "What's your favorite wine?" all the time, and I have to tell them, and I say it's like being a mom and having 100 children, and asking which is your favorite kid. I mean, I guarantee you, the mom has it narrowed down to the top 10. But on any given day, that can change. Like, I love Chablis, I love Barolo, I love Champagne, I love Napa Cab. It just shifts in and out, but you can't pick one as a whole, in my opinion, especially as a wine person.
Completely.
Okay, so
oh my God, I don't know. Hold on, I've got one.
Okay, let me double check. I'm just making sure that I have this absolutely correct this time.
Take your time, guys. There's only like 100 people waiting.
Thanks. Yeah. We need like that. We need music, like the game show music.
Yeah. Like when the chefs are tasting the food on those competition shows. Yeah.
The suspenseful music.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I have my guesses, and I can work out why whenever someone else makes her guesses first, because she's very competitive, I've seen, and
I swear, I'm just enthusiastic.
Why don't we just focus on kind of one thing, because there's a lot of things going on here. Mm-hmm. Let's just tell us what you think is the order oldest to newest.
Okay. You want me to put myself out there? Should I go first?
Well, whoever.
Okay. I believe oldest to newest is B, A, C, D.
B, A, C, D. Okay.
B, A, C. That's my order. B, A, C, D.
Okay, so I was in agreement with B. B seemed to be the most brooding on the palate and tannic and built to age for me. Then I was C. Were you C is your second one as well?
Nope, Flo was
okay.
A.
Flo was A. Okay, so yeah, C
don't
seemed to be
BC
aromatic and acidic and just a gorgeous wine overall. And then I got to make a final decision because D and A, I'm on the fence with both. Oh. I put D as 15 because it was an earlier harvest and it seemed to have a little bit more alcohol. And then A was my 2016. Yeah, because it seemed to have a nice acidity to it and complexity.
All right, Jess?
But I've been wrong before on this show.
There are no wrong answers in wine.
Well, we're all over the board, really, because I thought oldest to newest, I thought it was C, D, A, B.
Okay.
Well,
next time I think Christian is on the spot and we do this again.
He's always makes himself the moderator. He never puts himself out there. I've always wanted him to put himself out there.
I'll send the wines and he's on the spot.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Regions of the world.
I like that. Oh gosh.
All right. Well, I'm just going to enjoy this small amount of power while I have it. So these are the results. So it's CADB. So
CADB. Nice. Ooh.
So Jess was right in that C was 13. Florencia was right in that 14 was A. And
Aaron got D.
Aaron was right in that D was 15.
And I got B.
And Jess was right in that B was 16. So
Jess wins.
So, well, yeah, I guess Jess
50%.
Jess won this game too. So, anyways,
what's my prize?
I'm more interested in now your reaction in terms of what do you see now that you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's I love how I actually feel like I always get the evens and the odds mixed up. So I don't know why, but for the last decade, I always have this overarching, it's just a conclusion that the odd years are slightly more tightly wound than the even years. And we've seen this in the weather, that like 13 and 15, very little rain and a little cooler, right? So when I look for 13s and 15s, I hunt for slightly more tightly wound and cooler fruit expressions. So the fact that I flipped them in my mind is a little consistent. I just got them wrong, right? I didn't identify the older one, and I thought that 13 was B because it had the softest tannins. How foolish of me to think that in 2013, a wine that's only, I don't know how many years is that old, 7 years old, would start showing age. I should have just, that was my fault. That's why I got that wrong. Because it is the softest of the flight. But then I recognized as 2014 simply because it had the ripest fruit. So this is the one that showed a little bit more of riper cherries and a little bit more fruit forward coming straight out of the glass. And I just know that in 2014, we hit 100 degrees a little bit more often in 14 than in any of these other four vintages, right? 2014 was just a notoriously sunny, warm, beautiful vintage. So it's always been our bodacious vintage of the decade. So that's the only reason why I got this one right. Everything else, oh well. I get to drink away my sorrow.
Well, I think I told you the reasoning why I thought the wines were what they were, which apparently was all wrong. But that's why I blind date.
Not all wrong.
You weren't all wrong.
I went 1 for 6, which I don't think is a pass, but it's okay. I'll just have to taste more vials of Palmaz, which I'm okay with. And going back and tasting, I can see where C is 13 because of the structure component.
I think I should say there's something interesting about 13 that's different from every vintage we've ever made. It actually contains all 5 Bordeaux. And there's something, and I just wanted to throw this out there. It's funny because it's like 0.56% Merlot, 0.59% Petit Verdot. When I think about these vintages, when I see really long tasting notes and really complicated blend maps, I feel like you guys struggle to make these wines. Not struggle in a bad way, but these are fussier vintages. Is that fair to say?
Completely fair. It's that completely fair. Yeah, you can tell that we tweaked it until we finally were like, okay, I give up. It didn't come together naturally. So and what I don't know, to be fair, did it not come together naturally because the wines itself are different, or are we just insecure that year? Which, I mean, this is a lifelong career.
I mean, there is a human element to every one of these wines, and where you are in your life and what happened the night before the tasting. I believe I know because I see it. I work with you people every day, and so sometimes I see some wines come together just naturally, just kind of a pen to paper. It just happens, and other vintages we in the cellar are waiting. Like, have they not blended this wine yet? Like, what's going on? Are we waiting? What are we waiting on?
I remember 2013. I mean, we see the data right here, obviously, but just thinking back to being in 2013, and it was hot, it was dry, it was kind of one of those years where you're going, okay, I wonder what's going to come out of the vineyard this year. You know, so I
Well, and of course, remember that when we're blending this, we've got in tank the next vintage, right? So we've got 14, which was this ripe, delicious, total fruit bomb young wine on the heels of 30.
And it's funny because, so we're talking about 14, two vintage, like two blending cabots. Nearest makes no difference, 99% cab, and nearest makes no difference, 1% cab franc.
My favorite is when you're in the tasting room and you get that guy and you tell him the varietals. He says, "Oh yeah, that 1% cab franc. Yeah, I got that. I can taste it. I can't taste it."
Totally. Actually, I've got one better for you. When the guy swirls the glass and goes, you know, the rains were really good that year. What? Huh?
Yeah.
How'd you taste that?
And God bless the rains down in Africa. Yes.
I was absolutely just singing that song in my head.
You know, and then to wrap this up, 15. You know, I think for me, 15 and 16 are closer together than 13 and 14 are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in stylistically, in the way that I think the vineyard presented that year. And you know, we look at these two wines; they're really similar in the blend. So I don't know if you could taste these differences, say between 5 and 4 varietals or 5 and 2 varietals. These are the two vintages that I think you guys would have had the most trouble trying to pin, because you know they're very similar to each other.
Just as redemption, on my vial, that was the one I was having trouble with. I put 15/16 on, so I hope that's a little bit of redemption there.
Absolutely.
So how about a question where there's no right or wrong answer? Which of the 4 was your favorite?
Wow.
I didn't say it was an easy question.
It's not an easy question.
Did you taste alone to choose a favorite? We actually, someone asked on the feed, and I thought it was a great question.
The funny thing is, I really liked B. I liked the 2016 because it had this perfumed, layered, a little bit of greenness combined with red to dark fruit, and it was just pretty. It was pretty on the palate.
Yeah,
that was my favorite.
Thank you. I love to hear that. Honestly, I don't think any of us in the winemaking team feel like we're just hitting our stride. So every new vintage, we're more excited about than the next. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I love 16. I think we're doing such an amazing job, and the vineyards, and I feel like 16 and kind of like tasting the 19 earlier yesterday. The vineyards are coming in. The team has been working with this vineyard for, the same winemaking team's been working here since 2003. We're just hitting our stride. They know every vine, every row. They're really getting it. They're dialing it in. So I love 16 too. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I love looking at the past and say, we were making solid wine, we're doing a nice job, but I love to see that we're still improving in the future. And it's something that unfortunately in the wine collecting world, they tend to they lean into the past very deeply and over fantasize about what happened in the past. Oh, the 61 Bordeaux's, ooh, the 45 Burgundies, And as a producer, I'm all about what am I doing now to make wines better tomorrow, Like 61, sure, whatever. But right now, what's happening now? So
my podcast tomorrow is about older vintage Palmaz Cabernet. I won't even know about them. No, I will. I absolutely will.
Well, I have to say that my favorite was the 2013. I mean, I love the 16. I was between the 13 and the 16 as my favorites, but I don't know. There's like a meatiness, like a kind of unctuousness.
It is. It's the most savory of all of them, right? It's that most like a concentration of like a demi-glace. When you reduce it down and it has that sort of sweet
Well, then-
savory.
Yeah. Well, then my next question is, which vintage would you like to sit down the most and lay down?
Oh, age-wise, 15.
Yeah. 15?
15. Yeah, 15's got it. 15 is wound tight like a clock, and it's gonna just unwind really beautifully. I think it's got the acid for it.
Well, so I think there's one more tool that we have in our toolbox to sort of talk a little bit about why that might be, right? And so it's the blend maps, right? We've shown blend maps on the show before. These are, Aaron, if you haven't seen these are basically visual representations of what is in the blend, right? What parcels contributed. So 13. Awesome. Big presence of the upper vineyard found in, and what's cool is that, when the winemaking team makes the wines, I mean, they're doing it basically blind. They don't get to know, they don't see these blend maps until after the blend is complete. And then we in the viticultural team basically go back and look, and we try to explain, why after 2.5 years did they pick this parcel? What was it about the viticulture program that led to, success? So we look at 13. 14 was big presence of lower vineyard fruit. So, we handed it back to the lower vineyard in 14. Then we look at 15. I'm sorry, that's 16. We look at 15, kind of a split year. We see some presence from both. And then 16 was definitely a lower vineyard vintage. So, maybe we say 15, Flo, what you were saying, 15 you thought was sort of the vintage to be able to lay down. Look how much Clone 6, so, it's those who don't know. So Clone 6, Flo knows, it's that darkest red parcel right there. Huge amount of it, almost, I would say 70% of that parcel's in this wine. And we all know Clone 6 has one of the thickest skin and tannin and texture components. It's a beast. It's a total beast.
It's a beast. Yeah.
So
cool.
It's good. I'm glad it makes sense. I mean, that's all I ask for at the end of the day, is that there is some logic to all of this. And so,
That's so true. So much fun. Oh my gosh, Aaron, thank you for playing along and lending your palate and your talents. I tell you, it is my favorite thing to do, and I just love blind tasting, and I love testing my brain, and and whatever I can do to put the head and the palate together. It's so much fun, and I love being able to hear your descriptors and your thoughts on this. This is just fantastic.
Hey, this is a lot of fun. It looks like I need to drink more Palmaz, and thank you for all the samples, because I will now, because there's a bunch of it here.
Yes, and just proper sommelier style. We sent you also a bottle of Riesling to help clean that off, right? There's a little Riesling for a little palate cleanser.
Very nice.
Oh, God.
Just to kind of wash it all away. So you didn't mean to hurt you. Thank you. Now, just one big word. I know that you did pass along this show to your customer base in Texas, and just a brief word. If anyone who is a restaurateur or a wine shop in the Texas area, all these wines that we tasted, well, obviously not the barrel samples, but the 13 through the 16 are available. There are some really cool 3 vintage wood 3-packs and 6-packs, right? Available. In market at RNDC at all 3 of your warehouses. So if anyone wishes to repeat this in Texas, we'd be delighted to oblige. So, Aaron, is there anything that you'd like to add for your fellow Texans out there?
No, I'm excited to be in Texas. It was a move that happened about 6 months ago, and we are over the world to be in this community. So that's all I have to say.
Gosh. Well, have some brisket for me. I brisket and a margarita, please. I so miss that.
I think we're doing burnt ends this weekend.
Now those are fighting words.
A cheater way of burnt ends, which my buddy Jason Hysaw, who sells all Texas wine, he knows how to barbecue like no other. So he's going to come over and show me how to do it.
Yum.
Awesome.
Well, have a great 4th of July. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Thank you for,
Thanks
thank
for
you
having me.
joining us. Yes.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Aaron. Cheers.
Oh my God. What a good sport. My God, I can't believe I actually guessed the vineyards though. Sorry. You're right.
was
Maybe I'm a little more,
easy.
maybe I'm just a little more competitive than that take on. But Jess, well done. Palmaz is still prevailed. We still
So
got it.
palate's still working.
Yeah, exactly. Still got it.
Yeah, the only thing we confirmed today is that we have a raging case of seller's palate.
Yeah.
So
Ouch.
Well, it's not great.
it's okay. It's it's to be expected.
A minor case.
Fine. Okay, minor case.
So
I don't
So
mind.
switching gears, you don't mind. You love your seller's palate. I try very hard not to drink my own wine at home, too often. But it is pretty tempting when I have all these gorgeous little vials after a wine stream to just take them home and enjoy them for the next few days.
I have to say, this blind tasting was super cool with these little bottles. So
I
fun.
think it's fun. I think it's so fun in the words.
It is the ultimate equalizer because there's no way to guess the neck or the foil of the bottle.
Yeah.
We do these kind of brown paper bag blind tastings, and you can kind of, it's like, oh, I know that's the glass.
Right. Well, and not only that, you start
foil.
feeling the punt of the glass. You go, oh yeah, that really deep pump. I know who's that. Or you're like, this is, I think that's Schaefer.
And
yeah.
What is cool is that, for our viewers, as many of you know, we are doing these virtual tastings. And if you guys want to have that, your virtual tasting done blind, let us know. We can actually label them A, B, C, D, or however you want, and then your ambassador can kind of unveil. And it's really fun to do this. It's a great test. As you can tell, it doesn't require a sommelier license to pull this off. It's a lot of fun to do. And I'll tell you one other thing. And a lot of people say, well, my palate, I don't think I could guess red or whites. Let me tell you, guessing red and whites in the right context, sometimes it's just as hard. And if you go and you get those black glasses, the ones that are you can't see through them, and you do a blind tasting, I can't tell you how many times I have been fooled silly on whether a wine was white or red.
Yeah. Chardonnay and Cabernet, when tasted in black glass, feel the same at the same temperature, right? Because
for me, like Sauvignon Blanc or Viognier and Cab Franc, like those are really hard to sometimes tell apart. I know, like to the Master Soms out there and the Soms, fine. You guys train and train and train. But for us mere mortals, it's tough. And,
Yeah, super fun. Absolutely. And we're seeing these virtual tastings happening more and more at the winery. It's really fun. And it's cool to see the responses. They're definitely working. So, if you are changing your travel plans and your expectations for the summer and you're sticking at home, we can still set up something fun and brainy and a good time for you and your friends. With that being said, I do know that today's wines are available for those who are not sommeliers and restaurant owners and wine shop owners watching the show who don't have access to RNDC.
I mean, basically, we have these great vertical packs. So they're really based on 3 vintages. So you can do 13, 14, 15, or 14, 15, 16. We have them in a variety of different options in terms of magnums, and we have these cool magnum packs.
These are individual bottles, right? So what we're seeing here, these are individual magnums, and then the magnums in wood. Is that correct?
That's correct.
3 packets.
And then we also have them in 13, 14, 15, and we can also package them in wood as well. The best way to work through all of this, I understand it's a little bit challenging, is just reach out to your ambassador, right? So talk to your ambassador. There's really no limit in what you can, package for yourself, and you can have a lot of fun. And if you do want to do those virtual tastings and do these blind, again, same person, reach out to them. They'll be happy to set that up for you.
Wonderful. Well, I can't believe how the time has flied. It's over an hour, and I hope, always so much fun, such a pleasure to be able to have everybody join us once again. It's our favorite part of the week, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Next week, we actually have, the theme is going to be fromage. We have a renowned author and blogger, Madame Fromage, joining us, and we're actually going to ship her some wines. And for those who want to taste along, next week we will be tasting the Rosé, the 16 Cabernet, and the Muscat, and she'll be walking us through the different cheeses that we'll be tasting with those wines, and kind of the logic of how does a cheesemonger, an expert in cheese, pair wines with cheese. So it's something that I've always felt really intimidated by when I go to the supermarket and I look at the cheese aisle and the cheese case and think, oh my God, I don't know every type of cheese and the different milks and the different ages and the different textures and what works best with each wine. And Tanya, next week, Madame Fromage, will be walking us through that logic.
That is going to be so much fun. That is so much fun. And by the way, I have to say, Flo, congratulations to the whole winemaking team.
Absolutely.
The Robb Report, that was pretty amazing. So for those of you who don't know, the Robb Report, out of nowhere, we had no idea that they were even that we were even in the running. Designated the Florencia Muscat, the domestic, or the best of the best domestic dessert wine, the best dessert wine in America. I mean, Flo, I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool.
Honestly, it was, and I've got to say, it was interesting because I remember before blending that wine, before that harvest, because this is the 2016 vintage, before that harvest, we actually got together as a team and tasted through 15 different muscats from around the world, and wanted to check in and give ourselves a gut check on, are we agreeing with the style? What is it that we like? What is it that we don't like? And we blind tasted, actually, all these different muscats from around the world. And it helped calibrate us to really rethink and challenge ourselves to make a better wine. So yeah, actually yesterday, after the blending session, I was able to share the good news of the award. It's pretty prestigious when you think you're the best in a category in the world.
This is huge. It's huge.
And it's confirmation that challenging us and doing that we did, of tasting all those other wines and checking in and gut checking and pushing ourselves to continue doing a little bit better every year, gave us a big boost. So
congratulations, that was huge. I mean, the reds dominate all the attention, and the Muscat, and they're called cellar toys, and they often don't get recognized. This is awesome. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're really excited, and of course we do have that vintage is just released now, and it is available, and we look forward to finding out what fabulous cheese will pair with it next week.
So excited.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Cheers. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 4:00 Pacific time. Salud.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.